James Gunn just did an exclusive interview with Entertainment Weekly, and while a lot of channels like 3C Films, New Rockstars, and Boba Talks did really good coverage on this interview, I think I was the only channel to really notice that James Gunn basically just told us who the first known metahuman would be in the DCU. And trust me, it is not a character that you were expecting, but this character is super important. So if you're interested in hearing about that, plus more, strap in. But before we get into it, I'd like to quickly say thank you to everyone who is watching this video right now. I really do appreciate it, but I'd also like to thank today's sponsor, me. That's right, I'm sponsoring today's video, and the only thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is watch this next clip from a passion project that I've been working on because I've been working so hard on it. But if you're not interested, you can skip to this timestamp. You bitch. Just kidding, I appreciate you for watching regardless, but without further ado, here's the clip.
You saying 35?
No, we're doing 50. I said 50 earlier. Caleb, tell him 50.
You know he's 10 minutes away.
You know what? I want 55 now, nigga. Wait, Caleb. I'm feeling some weird energy from this box.
Come on, just open the box.
Now with that out the way, the first thing that caught my eye when reading this article was this quote right here where James Gunn pretty much revealed that humanity has known about metahumans for about 300 years. Now what's interesting about this quote isn't the fact that it reveals that superpowered individuals have existed since before the events of this Superman movie. No, we have known that for months. We knew that this was not going to be an origin story, and we knew that we were stepping into a fully fleshed out universe. What's interesting about this fact is that it gives us a number. Now, with this number, we can actually figure out who the first known metahuman was in the DC universe. And in order to do so, all we need to do is figure out what year Superman takes place in. So stick with me. If we take a look at this frame of the Superman trailer, we can see that this guy in the background is most likely holding an iPhone. And an iPhone with 3 cameras. So if we know that the first iPhone with 3 cameras was the iPhone 11 Pro and it came out in 2019, that would mean the events of Superman have to take place in between 2019 and current day. So if by 2019 humans have known about metahumans for 300 years, then that would mean that the first known metahuman popped up in the early 1700s. Now this is going to sound nuts, but after doing a little bit of research about which metahumans existed in the early 1700s and were well documented, I came to the conclusion that James Gunn's first metahuman in his new DCU has to be Batman. Hey, I said it was going to sound absurd, but if we bring it back to 2008 to an event called Final Crisis and we take a look at the 6th issue, we see a famous panel where Batman got hit with the Omega Beams and he got sent back in time. And we actually get to see his journey through time in a story called Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne. Now, if we take a look at issue number 3 of this story, we actually learn that Batman ends up in the year 1718, which is exactly 301 years before the events of Superman, if you believe it takes place in 2019. If you believe it takes place in 2025, then it's 307 years. But regardless, the timelines roughly add up, and on top of this, we know that this Batman is very well documented in history because there's a character named Jack Valor who pretty much journals all of his interactions with Batman. Okay, wait, Ty, that's cool and all, but in the statement that you showed us, James Gunn said that humanity has been aware of metahumans for the past 300 years. Batman's not a metahuman. I'm actually very glad you brought that up, my dear viewer, because when I mentioned that Batman was very well documented in this story, I also mentioned that he was documented by a guy named Jack Valor, a man who referred to Batman as a ghost in his journal entries, and not in a metaphorical sense, in a very literal sense, because Batman literally told him that he was a time traveler. He also witnessed Batman disappear into nothingness before his very eyes. Now, if I was a historian in this world full of metahumans and I read this journal, I would be thinking, yeah, this guy interacted with a metahuman. Okay, I'll admit it, even I don't fully believe in what I'm saying, but can you imagine if this early in the game, James Gunn was actually setting up a Darkseid storyline where he sends Batman back in time with the Omega Beam? That would be insane. Wait, Editor Ty here, and right before I was about to put the finishing touches on this video, DC announced that Mr. Miracle would be getting his own animated show based on the 2017 run by Tom King. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really know who Mr. Miracle was until I decided to check out that Tom King run that this animated show will be based off of, and now I know that Mr. Miracle is the adopted son of Darkseid. Do you know what that means? If this show turns out to be canon, then they just confirmed DCU Darkseid, which means that Darkseid could have shot DCU Batman with the Omega Beam, sending him back in time, thus creating the first known metahuman in the DCU. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'll catch you on the... No, I'm just kidding! But moving on to the next topic that really caught my interest, I wanted to talk about the statements that James Gunn made in regards to the Justice League. So James Gunn basically begins by saying that he is very consciously not trying to give viewers homework, and that every movie, TV show, and animated project is a very specific, contained story. However, there is an overarching theme. There is an overarching story that will take a bit longer to tell. And then he goes on to confirm that the Justice League is involved in this overarching story that he's trying to tell. And so the interviewer asks him, more specifically, if the Justice League relates to the larger plans of the Gods and Monsters phase of the DCU, to which he confirms. Now, the reason that this line of questioning kind of piqued my interest is because when the journalist specifically asked about the relation between the Justice League and the moniker Gods and Monsters, they noted that James Gunn kind of slyly said, sure. And I know that doesn't sound very significant, but you guys gotta remember that James Gunn, like me, and probably a lot of you guys, is chronically online. And so I am certain that he has seen the theories online that state that the reason that the first chapter of the DCU is called Gods and Monsters is because the overarching villain of this chapter will be the Center, otherwise known as Dinosaur Island. God damn. But anyway, there's actually more evidence to support the fact that this theory was already in his head when they asked him this question. For example, earlier in this article, the interviewer brought up the fact that some fans are criticizing the Superman movie for having too many heroes and too many villains. They say it's going to feel congested. And James Gunn gave a lengthy response, but the part that I really want to focus in on is that last part of this quote where he kind of just slips in, this is the kind of place where there's an island full of dinosaurs that probably exists. So right there, as you guys can see, James Gunn just seemingly for no reason referenced Dinosaur Island. But you want to know why I don't think this was a random off-the-cuff remark to show how zany the DC universe is going to be? Well, I don't think it was random because later in the article, the writer revealed that James Gunn took this interview while in a conference room where he was later scheduled to review dailies for the show Lanterns. Oh yeah, and when they say dailies, they just mean raw, unedited footage, so he was just reviewing whatever they had so far. But anyway, if you've been following DC leaks and rumors, then you've probably already seen the theory that one of the main antagonists of the Lantern show is going to be a cult that worships the Center. And there's really three reasons why people believe this, or rather three pieces of evidence that support this theory. The first piece of evidence being this post that James Gunn reposted back in October of 2023 that reads, after James Gunn's big DC announcement, something tells me maybe it's a good time to revisit this. And then it's a picture of the DC comic, The New Frontier. Now, not only is there a cult that worships the Center in this comic, but the Center is also the main villain of this story, and by the end of it, Hal Jordan is the one to defeat him. But let's actually bring it back to the cult that worships the Center, because back in November of 2024, an actor by the name of Garrett Dillahunt got cast in Lanterns, and his character was described as a self-righteous, conspiracy-minded man who masks his ruthless ambition behind a charming and calculated facade. Now, after this character synopsis dropped, a lot of people thought that this sounded like a cult leader. And I wouldn't say that this is completely unfounded because cult expert Ashlyn Hilliard did an interview with HuffPost where she is quoted as saying, cult leaders are often highly charismatic and persuasive with a magnetic personality that can attract and influence followers. And then later, therapist Rachel Bernstein adds, they often feel they are above the law, are beyond reproach, and enjoy shaming those in the group who defy them. Now, if we take these two quotes and we take a look at DC's interpretation of a cult leader, then I think we get a self-righteous, conspiracy-minded man who masks his ruthless ambition behind a charming and calculated facade.
You are the tribute. Yours is the glory of nourishing the strength of the Center.
Now, those were the first two pieces of evidence to support the idea that the Cult of the Center is the main villain of the Lantern series. But what about the third one? Well, that one is just a little bit more cut and dry because it's just a video of James Gunn saying that the dark mystery found in Lanterns will lead into the greater story of the DCU, and I'm assuming he meant the first chapter of the DCU. Take a look.
In it, they discover a terrifying mystery that ties into our larger story of the DCU.
Now, if the only thing that James Gunn said was that Lanterns was going to tie into the greater story of the DCU, then maybe my mind, as well as a lot of other people's minds, wouldn't have went straight to the center. But it's the fact that he mentioned a dark mystery, that's what made it really pop off. Because if you read or even just watched the adaptation for The New Frontier, then you would know that for 90% of the story, the heroes didn't know who the Center was or what the Center was up to. The story really just revolved around Batman and Martian Manhunter trying to solve this, I guess you could say it was some kind of dark mystery. Now, with all of that said, let's finally bring it back to my original point. So if James Gunn had an interview with Entertainment Weekly right before he was scheduled to review footage for Lanterns, then it's probably safe to assume that he had the plot of Lanterns in the back of his mind. And if he had the plot of Lanterns in the back of his mind, and I was able to convince you that the Cult of the Center was the main antagonist of that show, then it would also be safe to assume that when he mentioned Dinosaur Island, it wasn't a coincidence. But you know James Gunn, he doesn't like to give too much away, so later in the interview, when the interviewer asks about the relation between Justice League and the chapter titled Gods and Monsters, he has to slyly answer, yeah, I guess they are kind of related, because if he is too eager, he knows that people have already made the connection between the Center and Gods and Monsters online, because he is also chronically online. Thus, we know that the main character or the main villain of the overarching story of the first chapter of the DCU is the Center. Oh my god, I wonder if this is going to be the one where you guys call me on my bullshit. Alright guys, I think we got to call it here. I wanted to talk about the Wonder Woman story at depth, but it is currently 6 a.m., so I think we'll save that for next week, along with the Wonder Woman fan casting video. I'm very excited to do that. I have 5 people already locked in, but please, feel free to let me know who you think Wonder Woman should be. I always love to read what you guys have to say, and I don't mind changing my list if you guys give me someone who's even better than who I have, so... yeah, just let me know who you think. Also, if you enjoyed the video, it is 6 a.m., I would really appreciate it if you made like Aaron the Plumber and smash that like and subscribe button. But yeah, I will talk to you guys next week.